So thanks for joining. Today I'm going to talk about how to start your Web3 project compliantly, or how to launch a token and not go to jail. Now, I'm going to talk about a lot of kind of ideas, some hard fact rules that you can go and implement today or tomorrow. But the first thing I do want to mention is that none of what I'm going to say is legal or financial advice, nor and you should hire your own professionals, nor is it any type of legal service, and the views I'm going to present are my own and not the ones of Collider Ventures. Great, so let's start. A little bit about myself. So I come from a background of working with startups. Today I work as an associate GC at Collider Ventures. What we do, a lot of what I do is working on investments and also working with our portfolio companies on various legal crypto-related issues, and also we work with regulators, specifically in Israel, on policy issues. Now, if you're tuning in, it's because you want to start your Web3 journey and do so with minimal to zero kind of legal or regulatory risk. So the way to do that is, go work for Apple or Google. This comes to say that this is an uncharted path, and a lot of what we're doing is new, and we're talking about mitigating risk and managing risk and not eliminating it completely. So keep that in mind when you start your journey. So I want to kind of begin the conversation with kind of a timeline of crypto, kind of a brief history of crypto. So we have obviously Bitcoin in 2009, Ethereum 2015. Then we have the 2017, 2018 ICO boom and bust, followed by kind of a bear market, and then DeFi summer in 2020, and coming into kind of blow-ups that we've seen culminating with the FTX winter. And the reason I'm pointing out these events, I'm obviously losing a lot of color in the middle, is just to kind of draw from them some major issues that present legal, kind of legal new waters, if you want to call it, and things that we have to deal with. And this is not totally new to crypto. You can see it in areas such as cybersecurity. Each time there's a leak or a hack, there's regulation coming. So yeah, brace yourself. And the asterisk is because we have MiCA that's coming in, and there are some regulations that apply, but this is going to be kind of what you should be used to. There's going to be changes coming in. There's going to be regulation that comes in response to other to events. So let's jump right in to kind of the heart of the conversation. And I want to start by discussing about decentralization. And this will be very useful when we move on with the presentation into kind of the middle of it and the end. This is how I want to start and why it matters. So decentralization makes technological infrastructure a public good, and especially when it works interoperably with other tech stacks and protocols. It's also censorship resistant. So we talked a little bit about Apple and Google. We all know about the force and the control that they have. So decentralization in that aspect makes the tech stack that we discussed, no one can block you from it. It allows for new incentive mechanisms and financial ecosystems that are innate to crypto and crypto systems. And it allows for new ways of participation, okay? Again, that are native and unique to crypto. So this is kind of one of the most important merits of decentralization that I would like to focus on. And here are some frameworks or kind of mental models for builders listening when you think about decentralization. So we obviously have decentralization on the tech stack, right? We have blockchain computing, which is open source and free for all. Economic decentralization, meaning with token economy, value can accrue to multiple stakeholders and not necessarily to a shareholder or some manager at the top. And legal decentralization, which is kind of guys know is on-chain voting, but in general, the permissionless decision-making and the open participation for all. So these are kind of the frameworks of decentralization. And I want to expand, obviously, on the last point, because this is a legal discussion. So the legal framework for decentralization. Generally, financial regulation around the world comes to tackle the problem of information asymmetry. Meaning, you have this agent principle problem where one person or a group of people control or has access to information that is disconnected from the people entrusting them with, be it funds, be it investment in their company. Okay, so we can think about a bank, we can think about an IPO. These are things that you probably know from just general and daily knowledge. And the way to mitigate that risk and tackle that is by disclosures. Right? So if a company goes to do an IPO, it presents these stacks of papers. These are disclosures. This is just information about the company that comes to level the playing field and make financial markets more efficient and more open and fair. Now, diving a little bit into the Howey test that most people in crypto know very well, but it's the American test for what makes an investment contract a security. So this comes to, basically this touches the managerial efforts of others, the last and most important test of the Howey test, which basically comes to say that if any person has managerial powers over a certain asset or underlying a certain asset, then we want to tackle that with regulation that is solved through disclosures. And this is kind of the single most important issue when we talk about crypto, in the sense of securities, but also in the sense of custody of assets and many other topics. And I argue that this is the most important topic. So you bore with my presentation and you still want to go ahead and start your project. That's great. So now we're going to kind of tackle or see some more practical advice and do's and don'ts. And I'm going to focus in or hone in on token launch just because that is maybe the most special and hard event for a crypto project's lifecycle. And it's obviously very specific to crypto. So we're going to start talk about that. So you want to launch a token. The first question is why, right? Why have a token? Your life is great. The SEC doesn't want to go after you or your loved ones. Why do it? So you want to introduce a token because you want to have decentralized on-chain governance in your protocol. You want to use a token as a unique incentive mechanism. Now, you can do that with USDC, you can do it with Bitcoin or Ether, but there's something that just opens a new world of opportunities when you do it with your native token, right? It's programmable, it's linked to the success of your project, etc. And safety. A token can enhance safety on the decentralization part, meaning talking about a 51% attack, talking about buying tokens to circumvent the will of the project. The financial price of the token will make it very expensive and very hard for that person. So we want to launch a token to kind of touch and enhance these points. But when? So as you can see, and as opposed to what we saw in kind of 2017, 2018, launching a token should come at the end of kind of a process of decentralization. So you start your project as a centralized entity, kind of a startup, and you start off kind of traditionally, as you will say, you try to find a product or build a product, find product market fit, marketing, business development, and then you slowly move into the realms of Web3, build a community, find different third parties to build and participate through grants or what have you. And at the end, you do hand over control over the protocol to the DAO with a token, and you do it gradually through kind of a well thought out plan. So when you ask when, the question is, it depends, obviously, because I am a lawyer, but also it has to come at the end of a roadmap. And and you basically want to strive for sufficient decentralization, which we're going to talk in a moment. So now we'll move on to talk about some kind of more practical advice that you can implement tomorrow. So the first is about token sales. When you're starting out, you want to sell your tokens only to accredited investors, meaning I see projects where very early on they want to go to an ICO or an IEO or an IDO. Do not do that until you're decentralized, and it will just put you right in the Howey test. And the Howey test is an example of many other tests around the world, so it doesn't really matter where you're operating from. You might have this problem regardless. So you want to sell your tokens to accredited investors, which means some equity and net worth requirements, or selling to professional investors, which in today's day and age is less of an issue with more professional angels and VCs around there. Kind of the industry has evolved and matured. And I do want to say that with MiCA coming into effect, it will happen in a year, we will see developments regarding token launches. We don't really know how the playbook will look, how different member states will enforce it, but there should be development there. So in a year from now, this presentation might look a bit different. So this is an evolving space. Next big advice is try to avoid exposure to the US, specifically on the part of securities laws. So we know that Gary Gensler doesn't like crypto and everything is a security. In general, try to limit selling tokens to US people. Even once you're decentralized and you want to do kind of this big token sale, limit US people. Secondary markets have a lot of benefits, but they might bring regulatory scrutiny. So you should think with yourself whether limiting it, blocking it on the tech level for some period of time brings more good than harm, and maybe pursue that. If you can at all not have much footprint in the US, that's obviously a good idea. And on the same token is also limiting access to users. Again, more on the UI front. If this is something that your project can handle, you should definitely think about that. Next up is communications in general. So if generally there's someone here who wants to develop a protocol and is hyping it as an investment opportunity, just stop doing that, okay? This is just a really, really bad idea. And this is true externally, so don't go on Twitter, but also internally. You should really pay attention to how you communicate. And these things will be scrutinized in potential future enforcement or litigation. Eventually, people will have access to those communications, and it will look bad. And also, it just shouldn't be kind of only an investment scheme. Again, the token should facilitate decentralization. Any communication, be it external or internal, indicating a core team in control, making decision in kind of a centralized way, is a red flag, and it shows that you didn't achieve or didn't reach the sufficient amount of decentralization that you should be. And this is true regardless of decentralization. Obviously, the third point, if there is a core team, it's not really decentralized, and any of kind of the investment hype that you might be building will look bad regardless of your decentralization level, and it's, again, not what you should be focused on. Okay, as we talked about a few slides, in a previous slide, you want to achieve sufficient decentralization. And the way to do it is through this process that we discussed that is basically titled progressive decentralization, meaning you start off as a centralized entity, and slowly over time, you have a roadmap to achieve decentralization, okay? And this doesn't happen overnight. This happens kind of a well thought out plan. And the token should be kind of the final note or the final act in a well thought plan for decentralization. And the utility doesn't really matter. This is something that is kind of new from 3 or 4 years ago. We used to think this, if the token has a utility, it's not a security, it's not an investment contract. That's not really the case anymore. And what you can see on the screen is that this is a very recent kind of court, a dismissal of a suit against Uniswap. They were attacked in court, and basically the judge released them from any obligation because of their decentralized nature. So utility did not play a part. It wasn't part of the discussion. It was all about decentralization. So maybe the point, the most easy advice to implement is to wait and plan it thoroughly. You have to realize that by launching a token, you create a lot of focus on price and a lot of extra noise that maybe is not the right thing for your project. And also makes it hard to pivot, makes it hard to go back and change things. It's kind of an only forward mindset. So we talked about token launches. Now I'm going to touch a little bit about other legal matters. And basically, we know that crypto is kind of this new beast in the world. It creates a lot of new legal issues, privacy, banking, taxes. And these things sometimes are not that specific to crypto, and they're ever changing. So perhaps the biggest advice I can give you is you need a lawyer. You need someone who understands what your project is doing exactly, and who understands crypto and can be available and with you on an ongoing basis. But I do want to pinpoint one thing, which is KYC and AML. And if you're building some sort of a DeFi protocol and you can implement tracking, monitoring of suspicious behaviors, wallets that have interacted with be it Tornado Cash or other malicious addresses, and do something about it, meaning blocking them or whatever it is that you can do, it will greatly improve your position in case of future enforcement. So all of the banking legislation talks about, it's a lot about effort, a lot about risk managing, and not kind of a 0 or 1. So if you show effort, it will put you in a much better spot. Okay, so this is going to be my last topic that I'm about to discuss, and we've covered kind of some advice, some things you can do, but obviously the most important topic that I would like for you to kind of go home with is the importance of decentralization and how decentralization puts you in another world when it comes to legal compliance, okay? Not because you don't have to comply with the law, it's because a lot of laws and regulation will be less relevant to a decentralized protocol. That's at least the argument brought by a lot of the crypto law community, and what we are working, people around the world, working with regulators to kind of transmit to them this information, that a centralized and a decentralized entity are not the same when it comes to managing assets or issuing whatever it is that you're selling. So how to decentralize, how to think about decentralization. So on the tech stack, you want to be interoperable. So obviously, we're talking about protocols that runs on the blockchain. There's this element embedded, but you want to have your tech stack built such that people can join, tap in, build on top, use it as much as possible. This will help for the decentralization narrative. You want to promote transparency. So obviously, we have on-chain voting, and everything on-chain is transparent, but you want to have this transparency off-chain. It can be your communication channels, documents, anything that discusses technological development. The more you can bring things to the surface, will just improve your decentralization level. And the role of the token should come to promote decentralization. So we covered that in a previous slide, but you want to use the token as a decentralization tool and not some exit strategy for liquidity, not a way to just bring marketing or something of that sort. This should be your focus when launching a token. And the last point I'm going to discuss today is kind of a model you can take home and think about. You want to, let's say you're building the protocol, right? You're building some smart contract or protocol that runs on the blockchain. You want this level to be public and decentralized, and people be able to tap into this service and build basically kind of businesses on top of that. And these applications or user interfaces can be a private business, can work, not be kind of a decentralized entity, and have all of what you're building before, meaning the incentive mechanism or things on the decentralization level, support this thesis. So what we argue is that on the protocol level, if this is decentralized and the level above allows any person to kind of tap in and create these businesses on top, it will also improve decentralization there and can divide incentives between the two. Yeah, thank you. Question?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's an important part of the Web3, the legal side. I wanted to ask you about sanctioned addresses. So if you have some protocol, some product, is there some framework already how you can handle not interacting with sanctioned addresses to not appear in some lists for some regulators?
So you're asking how can someone actually enforce or mitigate that risk that I discussed by blocking or limiting problematic addresses, let's call it. So yeah, the main way to do it is on the UI front. And this relates to the last point that I discussed, is we argue that because these protocols are open sourced, free for all, you can't limit someone from interacting with it. What you can limit is the level on top from interacting with the UI of Uniswap, right? But people can interact with Uniswap in other ways if they're savvy enough. So this is the way to do it, and then the legal argument is that because that underlying level is decentralized, one can say that this is kind of a public good, so you don't necessarily regulate the street the same way you regulate a store that is on that street. So this is the argument. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, cheers for the presentation. Can you go into Mika a little bit and the sort of changes, both in terms of the travel rule that we've already seen in Europe, but also the changes that will come into effect in next year with Mika? Yeah,
so I won't go into that too deep, but we know that Mika greatly tackles kind of the custodian part of it, right? The centralized. It does a great job of that. It's very savvy. It doesn't really cover a lot of decentralized entities, so the Uniswap of the world and DAOs, it's not really clear. It covers a lot of issuance of stablecoins. And also it talks about launching tokens. You have to file a white paper. This is pretty clear by the law, but as I said, because there's another year for it to come into effect, we don't really know how the playbook will look. Add on top of that is that enforcement will lie in each individual state. So there's another level of uncertainty. I would say that for future, like Coinbase, Kraken, operating in Europe, these custodians, it's much clearer. Even more true for stablecoin issuers. Great work. All of the decentralized part, we'll have to see.
Thanks for the presentation. I had a question about data retention. So let's say that my service needs to maintain some database with some private data from, or let's say Kraken, right? I might have some private data for each customer, let's say. What are the regulations in this sense of what authorities can force me to give them access to? I guess this changes also between jurisdictions as well, but.
Yeah, well, again, when you talk about a service like Kraken, the conversation shouldn't be much more different than just any other service. But when you talk about some, like generally information that's stored on the Ethereum blockchain, which jurisdiction should enforce that? So, and obviously it's addresses which are not personal identity or identifiers, but what if there is in the future with ZK and stuff of that sort? And this is a world that is ever changing. We just saw an article by Vitalik. Yeah, I don't have much to give you on that front. We work more with DAOs on decentralization and token launch, but there's an array of different legal topics for many lawyers to tap in.
Maybe just a quick question:
Yeah.
if you had to open a Web3 startup, where would you open it? Which is the
Where in the world?
jurisdiction? Where in the world? Yes, you're free to go everywhere you want.
So
You have a lot of money, I guess.
yeah, I would definitely not optimize for like jurisdiction selection. There are, Portugal is good for crypto, Zurich is good for crypto. These are fine. I would first try to find a place where you can actually build a company, so you can bring talent, you can bring money. That should be your focus. And once you're big enough, you can later do the most elaborate schemes of opening a foundation, launching a token. We all move to a different part of the world. You will have time for that. But at the start, you should focus on making the best product exist. And if that means being in Europe next to your hometown because you know all the developers and all of the ecosystem, then you should probably do that. Okay, thank you.